Okay. Okay, so Nilli, if you want me, I can read the questions so that you can focus on answering them if you want me to do that. Also, Nilli, I want you to address the fact that if you just take it as you mentioned it, then so black and white, it's one thing. But remember that our hormones today are affected by plastics, by our chicken wheat because of the hormones in it, the dairy products, the lack of nutrients, right? The glyphosate that's in our foods, besides all the stress and everything else and the lack that happens. There is so much happening otherwise that it affects our hormones as well. So I want you to address that. Okay, so if you want to address that first, or I'm going to just start. I'm going to start with Rhonda.
Whatever you want me to start with, they're all really important questions. I'll start with yours first, Nomi, which has to do what your basic. I hear you have a point in saying that there are a lot of endocrine disruptors, and
Mm-hmm.
those endocrine disruptors can come from a variety of different places. But what's the specific question that you have on that? What is it that you're asking me to address?
So I think it's a lot harder. I think it's a lot harder to manage your hormones because there are so many more hormone disruptors that we're facing. So specifically when you're a woman who is going through perimenopause or menopause, or you're a girl today who has PCOS, which is rising, right?
Right.
Or there's so many, they're talking about the amount of fertility issues that people are facing today that they didn't face 20 years ago. So I think that I think there has to be a greater deep dive into your hormones because you don't know what's disrupting. Like you can start taking all these different you can start taking all these different like magnesium and different things like that in order to control your stress responses, all these different things, whatever it is that's affecting. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it's much more personalized today because it's not like it was 20, 30 years ago where you can take some supplements or you can eat the food you're eating, right? Because of what's in them can be disrupting your hormones on a minute basis.
I
That's
hear
what
what
I'm
you're
saying.
saying. I really hear what you're saying, and I think it's actually an important point to address because it is and it isn't. It is and it isn't, and I'll explain what I mean by it. It's without a doubt 100% correct that there are more things that we experience and come across on our day-to-day that negatively impact our hormones, produce inflammation, and creep into our system that that can disrupt our health. This is a fact. How that affects us is also very individual, meaning we have differences in our genes that will make us more susceptible to those new invaders. Some people will be more susceptible to that, and some people will be less susceptible to that. I am very much for using more natural fragrances and making sure that in cosmetics, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically in perfumes, that we are very, very mindful of what is within those products because those are definite endocrine disruptors that we see in research really do clinically interrupt fertility in younger women. It's also really important that we address plastics because plastics, again, we see clinically in research that they are known, the amount that is currently found within our food does disrupt our hormones. But, and this is a really big but, I would say that this is less of an issue than we think it is. And what's more of an issue is what we definitely know is going to happen to us, which is perimenopause and menopause. This is something that's going to affect 100% of women who are lucky enough to get to this stage. And it comes with a certain pathology, right? There are certain things that happen to women when they hit the stage. And this is something that we could say accounts to 100% of women. So I'm not discrediting the fact that there are these issues in our food supply chain, in the lotions that we wear and all of that. And that definitely requires our focus and attention, and there needs to be a shift in that space. That's 100% correct. But it doesn't affect people in the same way that perimenopause and menopause is 100% going to affect us. And so regardless of the endocrine disruptors that are out in the pool and in the air and in the environment, the same things are going to happen to us. So it is really important that the topics that I shared yesterday are looked at regardless of the endocrine disruptors. Our digestion, yes, indeed, is going to shift. The advice that I gave is going to be useful regardless of the fact that there are endocrine disruptors. Like that was already in my consciousness before I wrote the presentation. What I gave as a result of the focusing on the adrenal glands, because that is now going to be what spares your estrogen production and your progesterone production, is important regardless of the endocrine disruptors. So yes, what you're saying is correct. It is in the environment, but regardless of that, anyone would benefit from focusing on those things because it is part of the pathology of menopause.
Right, 100%, 100%. But I think it's becoming more individual because of those things. But you know what? We don't have much time. I want to go to the next one. We can discuss this separately. Okay. So Rhonda asked, I wasn't a candidate for estrogen therapy, but doesn't progesterone have a different protocol?
Right, so estrogen is more of an issue when it comes to blood clotting. So that's typically the reason why someone would not be a candidate for estrogen, either for blood clotting and they're on some type of blood thinner, or because some type of cancer risk. So depending on what the reason is, let's say, for example, if it's a blood clotting issue, so sometimes a person would be a better candidate, let's say, for some type of transdermal form of estrogen, like an estrogen patch, might actually not be a conflict when it comes to a blood clotting condition. And that's definitely something that you should talk with your gynecologist. Regardless of that, there are a lot of natural things that you could do to increase your estrogen. Like, for example, eating foods like sweet potatoes and oats and taking herbs that help increase estrogen, that will help increase a little bit of estrogen. In regards to progesterone, you are 100% correct. Progesterone does not pose the same risk on blood clotting or on certain types of genetic cancers, and that could be taken independently of estrogen. The amount of progesterone you would take is not going to be the same amount that you would take if you would have estrogen, because they do balance each other out. But even taking a little bit of progesterone, obviously under the guidance of a doctor, can help. It can help improve the quality of sleep, improve the quality of stress. And it's definitely something that you should talk to your doctor about. You can get over-the-counter progesterone creams and experiment with them and see how they make you feel. Obviously, there's a question of like quality control. There's a question of how much is actually coming out in the dose per pump of cream if it's not prescribed. But it's definitely something that if you're concerned about, again, your anxiety and your ability to fall asleep, looking at a type of transdermal progesterone or even a progesterone insert could be really, really helpful, and definitely something you should talk to your doctor about. And if your doctor doesn't know much about it, then just go to a different gynecologist, because not every gynecologist specializes in menopause and menopause, even though they're a gynecologist. Perimenopause and menopause is not a thorough enough subject that is taught in obstetrics, and so it's important to go to a doctor that really specializes in that life stage.
Okay, next. Okay. Can you please explain a bit more about the Alzheimer dementia connection, hormones, and how can someone get tested to see what therapies are needed? Is this for only women only, or men can be tested as well? So Nilli, a little bit like more
Yeah.
compact.
So,
Okay.
basically the answer is the most important test to test for is ApoE4. ApoE4. I'm going to write that down right now in the chat. ApoE4 gene. You want to test if you're some form of a variant of this gene. And depending on what variant you are, whether it's a heterozygous or homozygous mutation, then it's going to indicate what increased risk you have of dementia. Now, estrogen plays a vital role in our protection of neuroinflammation, the vessels in the brain, how we utilize, how blood goes to the brain, how we utilize sugar in the brain, etc. The moment we have an estrogen decline, everything that estrogen was supporting in our brain is now going to significantly drop. And women with this ApoE4 gene mutation are going to have an even harder time to protect themselves after this estrogen drop. And so by testing to see if you are a variant, if you have this mutation, and you are positive that you have this mutation, taking estrogen, taking bioidentical estrogen during perimenopause and menopause will almost cut your risk of dementia in half, if not more. The best form of protection against dementia is exercise. Exercise is the #1 way to prevent dementia. However, there is a hormonal component. And so making sure that your hormones are stable after perimenopause and menopause is the next thing that you can do. And then the third thing you could do is omega-3 fatty acids.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Judith Sarah, I can answer that question, so I'll answer that question later because it's an easier question. Okay, Michal Liba, Nilli, can you address again if someone is Eliquis blood thinner, is on Eliquis blood thinner and has MTHFR, how to deal with hormones?
So MTHFR is a gene mutation that 50% of Jews have, and it doesn't necessarily affect your hormones as much as it affects your neurotransmitter production. So like having a depletion in serotonin and melatonin, for example, having an increased risk for digestive disorders. The best thing that you could do with an MTHFR gene mutation is just make sure that you're taking a methylated B vitamin, like a methylated B12 and a methylated folate. And if you do that with that mutation, you're really, really protecting yourself. Sometimes you'll have to take the extra step of taking something called SAM-E, SAM-E. If you have this mutation, also it's 2 genes that you need to test for, not just 1. And in regards to hormones, you really don't have to worry so much about the connection as long as you're taking these methylated B vitamins. In regards to Eliquis, it's the same thing like I said before, it's a blood thinner. So if you're taking a blood thinner, then you might be totally fine taking a transdermal form of estrogen. And that's something that you can only really confirm with your doctor.
Your doctor. Right. Okay, so someone asked, did you tell people to take propolis?
Propolis?
Yeah.
No.
So someone asked how much propolis. So I would just on propolis just follow the instructions on the bottle, and propolis is really also before you get like when you're feeling sick and different things like that. So that's really what propolis is. Okay, next, Miriam. Okay, what about bioidentical hormones for postmenopausal women? Would that help and be beneficial at that point?
Right. So when it comes to bioidenticals, the farther out you are from menopause, the less protective it is, because there's almost kind of like a certain amount of damage that has already occurred. Like, for example, if you look at your arteries and veins, estrogen is really important for making sure that your arteries and veins have that type of like juiciness. Like if you look at like young skin and it has like that juicy bounciness, it's like nice and flexible. So estrogen does the same thing for your arteries and veins. And the longer you are without that estrogen, the more dry and brittle your arteries and veins become. So taking it so much after the fact might have might be less applicable, but it still might be helpful in other things. It still might be helpful with preventing Alzheimer's, with changing the way you feel and sleep. It's definitely something that's worth experimenting, but it's not going to have the same effect if you're, let's say you're 7 years post-menopause. That's why it's so important for women to understand that it is something that they should experiment with earlier on, because it'll have a better protective effect. Also, bioidenticals don't have to be something that's long-term. It could be something that's used short-term for the transitionary period, or it can actually be something that you can use well into your 70s and 80s. And there's a lot of variation as to how you can use it. So the short answer is try it, see if you like it, if it makes you feel better, but it won't have the same protective effect that it would have had if you had taken it earlier on.
Okay, so someone just asked the same question about in their 60s, and you just answered that question. Yesterday, you discussed perimenopause and some things that can go wrong when hormones are not being activated or produced.
Right.
Sometimes this will hit the digestive tract, etc. Remember, there's also the gut microbiome
Right.
that is a very big factor. There's hormones, and 70% of your immune system, if not more, is in your gut microbiome. So what would cause a young woman of 39 years to sometimes go in a matter of minutes to tremendous dryness, her skin and her feeling of not having a drop of water in her system? What can be causing this? I know you don't have the person history, but just from your knowledge, what can be causing this and what can be taken to keep the body on even keel?
It doesn't sound hormonal. If
Yeah.
someone all of a sudden feels like completely dry, that doesn't sound hormonal. The impact of hormones is something that's more subtle and over the span of days. It doesn't necessarily happen instantaneous unless you took like a really big dose of a hormone, or you had a really sudden drop of a hormone, which normally doesn't happen unless it's medical. So it sounds like there's something else going on here. And what I would pinpoint it down to is a number of things, either digestion, kidneys, or adrenals. I would look at those first, but that's the only thing I can only do one-on-one.
Okay. Someone asked, do you have any suggestions for building bone and for treating osteoporosis? Do you think an infusion is helpful?
Yeah, so osteoporosis is really only resolvable in a number of ways. Weightlifting, you need to have pressure on the bone in order to prevent loss and to build it. So every woman really needs to do her share of resistance training. And as long as you commit to a minimum, you will make sure to incorporate it in your day-to-day. So what do I mean by a minimum? If every woman here committed to 20 minutes twice a week of resistance training, the likelihood that she will participate in that behavior long term will tremendously increase. That's number one. So the first thing to do for bone loss is to make sure that you have sometimes some type of resistance training, meaning you're putting pressure on the bone. The best way to do that is weightlifting, but it could also be Pilates and yoga if you don't have another option. The next thing that you could do is make sure that you're eating in an alkaline fashion, making sure that 80% of the foods that you eat are alkalizing. If anyone's interested in this, I'd be happy to send you a sheet that shows you which foods are alkalizing. And as long as 80% of your diet are those foods, you are decreasing the amount of calcium that you are stripping away from your bones. The third is to make sure that you are taking a calcium. You are not going to be adding calcium to your bones, but by having more circulating calcium, you're going to rely less on the calcium from your bones for whatever it is that you need. So it's important to take the right calcium. My favorite form of calcium for osteoporosis is by a company called Pure Synergy. I'll write that down right now in the chat. And it's a product called Bone Renewal, and I like it because of the fact that it has the right form of calcium. It has vitamin K2 in it. It has all the other minerals like boron and strontium that you need in order for your bones to be built, not just calcium. So those are the things that you should do if you are at risk for osteoporosis. Low estrogen increases the risk for osteoporosis, and I would totally be down for a woman taking medication for her osteoporosis, because osteoporosis is one of the leading causes of death in elderly, specifically osteoporosis in the hips. If an elderly woman falls and breaks her hip, that is it. So even though sometimes for some people there are consequences with taking osteoporosis medication, I think the long-term pro-con list, it's really great for preventing earlier deaths.
I just want to mention also that if you're not taking a full bone and you're doing vitamin D, just make sure that you always take K2 with it, because if that is what brings the vitamin D into it allows the vitamin D to go into the right places, right, rather than into the arteries, correct?
Right.
And
It helps with calcium.
right,
Yeah.
and also you know, I hear what she's saying, but my mother took my mother, and she actually has this, one of the side effects of the drugs, and what she does is she can't heal in her mouth when she can heal, she it creates some sort of side effect. So you have to really see where you're at and look into it more, I would say. Okay, if one is on warfare, and I don't really, I think this person needs to ask their doctor, Nilli. If one is on blood thinners, are the supplements you recommended allowed? I think that's a question, really. That's a private
No,
question.
I think this is actually a really important question. I'll tell you why. This is an important question. When you're taking blood thinners, there are a few supplements that you have to be nervous about, and those are typically anti-inflammatory supplements. So omega-3 fatty acid, turmeric, ginger, even things like frankincense, excuse me, those are anti-inflammatories. Any anti-inflammatory can significantly thin out your blood. And so it is definitely something that you should test with your doctor. Typically, if you're on a blood thinner, you should have your blood tested frequently. So it could be that you could tell your doctor, listen, I want to take these anti-inflammatories. Let's just adjust my medication. It's something that your doctor needs to be clued in about. You cannot take omega-3 fatty acids or turmeric or ginger while taking a blood thinner and have your doctor not know about it. And they need to know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Neely. Okay, so what about the progesterone being synthetic?
Oh, this is a great question. It's a really, really great question. The progesterone being synthetic. I think that there are a lot of different forms of hormones that are recommended. And we see a lot of differences in their results. Like, I'll use not the example of progesterone, but the example of estrogen. You could take estrogen that comes from horses. It's not synthetic, it's completely natural. And then you could take estradiol, which could be synthetic, and you'll see in results that the synthetic estradiol is actually better and more protective than the horse estrogen that's natural. So I think that whatever form of hormones you're going to take, do the research. You could look and see what's out there, ask your doctor or ask other people that are in the know and say, okay, I know that this is synthetic, but what does the research say? Is this the most beneficial option out there? Does this show a protective effect? So it's not so much of a concern whether it's synthetic or not, it's more of a concern what the research suggests. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so someone said, can a person, a dermatologist, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to just take a few. A dermatologist that herself was menopausal and was on hormone therapy with an amazing complexion said that hormone therapy could be started only 1 year after starting menopause, otherwise it's too late.
That's not true. That's just not true.
Okay. Can a person get enough omega-3 from eating fatty fish or flaxseed and chia seeds instead of taking fish oil supplements if one is on blood thinners?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, fatty fish, sardines, salmon, other forms of fish, you could definitely get a lot of omega-3s from that. If you want to add flaxseed to that, then just know you need double the amount of flaxseed in order to get the same effect as fish oil, right? Because even though you're getting omega-3, you're not getting the same amount of DHA. So you need to produce that. So it takes more of the omega-3 from flax in order to make it. But yeah, I think you could get enough to have an anti-inflammatory effect from that, 100%. You
Not
just
just
have to
that,
be
but
consistent. You just
right.
have to have it regularly.
Also flax seeds, which I have to start doing, but flax is really good to prevent, one of the things to prevent breast cancer, actually.
from the
But if
lignin.
when you have your flax seeds, just remember, don't buy them crushed and don't have them whole. So whenever you're going to take them, crush them on the spot because they become rancid pretty quickly. So that's
Yeah,
and
and store them in
always keep it in the
refrigerator.
freezer. Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay, ketogenic diets are popular nowadays, as well as a high protein emphasis for weight loss. Is that horrible for the bones?
Keto is more of an issue for your bones than high protein. That's a legitimate question because the more protein you consume, the more acidic your body's going to be. So even though protein is a really necessary nutrient, and we can't live without it, it needs to be in alignment with all the other foods that we eat. So it's really not supposed to exceed 20% of your total intake. Sometimes though, especially now, there's a huge fad to eat more protein style, like have it be a larger portion of your plate because of the fact that people are experiencing so much insulin resistance. Um, I'll say it like this. I'll say it like this. If you aim to have your meals be 20 grams of protein per meal, then you are fine. You don't have to worry about any pressure on your bones or osteoporosis from the acidification that comes from it. As far as keto is concerned, a lot less people actually benefit from keto than is suggested. It's really great for people who have really severe depression. It's really great for people who have neurological disorders like epilepsy because they really need the ketones in order to fuel their brain and have their brain function differently. If you do not fall into that category, it's not the most beneficial diet and it could really overflood the lymphatic system and clog it up, which is your immune system. So a high protein diet, not an issue. Ketogenic diet, also not necessarily an issue, but I wouldn't recommend it for the average person. And that
Okay, I'm only
can
go ahead. Sorry, Neely. Okay, I'm going to take one more question. So first of all, someone asked again the name for the supplement for osteoporosis. It didn't. I don't think it came
I
up.
wrote it in the chat.
You did put it in the chat. I don't see it either, Neely.
You don't? Did I accidentally send it to? Oh, I accidentally sent it to iPhone 5. 1 second, to
Yeah.
everyone.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to take one more. In terms of her contact, as always, I share everything on the WhatsApp group. So I'll share her workshop and also her contact information. Someone asked, okay, Pure Synergy Bone Renewal. Okay, can we just quickly, which progesterone from food? I don't understand that question.
Progesterone doesn't come from food. You could
Right.
you can eat foods that increase estrogen, but progesterone is not going to be necessarily increased from your food. However, you should just know that people who are in perimenopause can help their progesterone by having raw ground sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. That can help increase progesterone production based off of the fats. But besides those foods, it's not the same like estrogenic foods like sweet potatoes or oats. The only thing that you could really do is increase it slightly by having, again, raw ground sesame seeds and raw ground sunflower seeds.
But with raw ground sesame seeds, Neely, that would be trina, wouldn't it?
No, because with trina it's roasted and you need it raw.
No,
That's
but
the
what is
difference.
it? What if it says that? What if it's the full? You know how there's the two different trinas. There's the one.
Yeah.
So one
So
says,
you could have it with the hull. Of course, you want it with the outside hull because that's going to have more calcium, but it's still roasted.
"Oh, it is still roasted."
If it
So
was a
what would you
raw
do? So
trina,
you
it would be fine.
so what would you do? You would put it like in a Vitamix or NutriBlender,
Exactly.
and
Just
you would
like
just just like the flax, and you would just like pour it over your whatever you're
right.
eating.
But this is only again helpful for a perimenopausal woman because with the menopausal woman, she's no longer producing progesterone from the follicle, from where the follicle was. So
Uh-huh.
this is a suggestion only for a perimenopausal woman. For a menopausal woman, the only way that she could really preserve her progesterone is by handling her stress with the adrenals.
And that can be done even, like you said yesterday, people by doing deep breathing.
Yeah, breath work, the adrenal supplements, and decreasing inflammation.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
find
One last question. One last question.
quickly. I didn't find the Open Breath app. It was not found. It was all with the payment, with commitment. So I wanted to know.
So it probably is a payment.
No, it's
Okay.
completely free.
It's not?
It's free.
Okay.
I'll send you a link, Nomi, and you could put it in the group.
Okay.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Charlene, send me, I'm not going to put that link on the Nishma. Send me a private message and
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charlene. Okay, one last question, Nilli, and then we're going on to
Well,
Tefillah.
why not put it on the link for all of us?
Okay, okay, 1 second.
How does a woman know if she's perimenopausal or menopausal?
1 second here, 1 minute. No, there was something right before that. What about the diet, all fat and protein only? That was the keto diet. You answered that
That's
question.
keto.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Last question. How does one know if she's perimenopause or menopausal?
So it's very, very simple. It has to do with your FSH. So FSH stands for follicular stimulating hormone. This is something that's best to test for on day 2 or 3 of your cycle. Now, this is kind of a funny thing to say because if you're not getting cycles, then how are you going to test this? So if you haven't had your period in, let's say, 3 months and you think that you're of that age, then you should just test your FSH and see what it's at. The higher your FSH is, the closer you are to menopause. So if you haven't had your cycle in 3 months and your FSH is already in the menopausal range, then you know that you're in menopause. Whereas someone could do that test, and I've had this happen before. I've had a client who didn't have her period in 1.5 years, which normally they would say is menopause. Her FSH wasn't high enough. So I said, listen, I think you're probably going to get your period in the next few months. And lo and behold, she did. So FSH is basically the hormone that we could say, ooh, you're in menopause. Now, if you are still menstruating, you could test again on day 2 or 3 of your cycle how likely or how far away you are from menopause based off of that number. So typically a woman who is menstruating normally, her FSH is going to be at 5. As she slowly starts getting to menopause, which is around 50, like sometimes it'll get to 10, to 30, to 40, until she's in the 50 range, and then she's in menopause. But it varies a lot in the last few years. It could really go up and down.
Okay, the last question, it's a yes or a no, Nilli, okay? Are raw oats better than cooked oats for progesterone help?
Raw oats for estrogen, not for progesterone.
Okay. Nilli, amazing.
Thank you so much for your time, ladies.
Thank you. So send me all the information.